Okay, finally, this is the last sections from this technical track. This will be more awesome. I mean, extraordinary, because what we have 4 speakers in the paneling discussion, and they will discuss about PWA on cloud. Okay, let me introduce you to one by one. The first one is Miguel Ignacio Balparda, which is a product manager of Nexus. So he is about the last 6 years have traveled to globe, working remotely from more than 35 countries as a senior developer for, I don't know, some of biggest Magento project. And then since he joined Nexus, he has helped to maintain Magento 2 as a community maintainer among other OSS initiatives. And then the second, as we previously know, which is Gise Risma. He is the founder of Yurio. You know, Yurio is company, an internet company, home of many extensions, and then you can lift in your happy problem with the unused module or composer packages. And the third is Eric Airway, which is senior product manager of Magento and Adobe company. Eric is the senior product manager for the next generation shopping and merchant experiences at Magento, including progressive web apps or PWA. Eric joined Magento in early 2015 and brings 20 plus years of experience building high-performing team. And last but not least, it is Jamie Maria Soren. Hopefully I'm not wrongly pronounced it. The Chief Strategy Officer of Deity. So Jamie Maria is addicted to e-commerce, in love with code, and her mind bound to business. Driven by the urge of innovation, she fights with the aim to improve the online world around her. Okay, please find the profile of the panelists here. Please giving the biggest applause for the speakers, everyone. So Miguel, you can take over from here. Thank you.
Thank you, Buteri. So first of all, thanks a lot for being here today. I know it's early some places, really late some places. So I really like this kind of events because we get together and we get to talk about the stuff we love. So yeah, now that we did the introductions, I'm gonna start sharing my screen so we can see the slides real quick. All right, you go, Eric.
All right, great. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. So I think, going in some introductions here, I think most of it's covered. So for those who don't know me, my name is Eric Arway. I'm the senior manager of merchant and shopping experiences at Magento, now Adobe, and looking forward to having a great discussion on PWA. We're doing a lot of great things, and I'm really, really proud to be here and happy to be with such experts as part of this panel. So, hello.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Jamie. I'm the co-founder and chief strategy officer of a company called Deity. We are based in the Netherlands. And for those who don't know us, we are focusing mainly on bringing new technology to e-commerce. And part of that is our Falcon product, which is a full PWA platform.
Yeah, and hi everybody. My name is Jesse Reitsma, also from the Netherlands, so Belanda actually in Indonesian. And I'm training mostly developers in the area of React and Vue. So actually that would be also nice to mix it in this little panel.
Hello everybody, my name is Miguel. I'm the product manager for Magento at Nexus, and I've been trying forever to bring PWA to the masses. We do hosting for everybody, and PWA has been something I've been trying to support forever. So here we are talking with the best. Now we're going to start going over the current alternative for Magento 2. We are going to cover the most common options here today. We are going to cover the three most common frameworks, in implementations, alternatives, anyone you want to call it, and then we are going to cover an extra one. It's a do-it-yourself. But I wanted to start with this topic mostly because there are a lot of alternatives out there. There are a lot of Magento alternatives out there. And I really believe we need to go in deep to at least some of them so you can actually understand how to use this, how to implement this, and how this fit in your environment. So, Jamie, do you want to go first?
Yes, sure. Our alternative would be Falcon. We build a platform which can do progressive web apps for e-commerce. And I think, Miguel, we see your screen changing now. I'm not sure if that is.
Sorry.
To show. No, just in case you're putting something up that you don't want people to see.
There you go. I'll fix this now.
Don't worry. So what we did is we built a complete platform. We started this before even the name PWA was out there. We started with building the first headless solution for Magento 2. We then saw that, as you all know, you have some experience with the Magento 2 font not being the best. We decided to cut it and to make it into a headless solution. Back then it was pretty interesting as there was not really a name. PWA was not a hype yet, but we really wanted to do something different with the front end. One of our main differences is that we have a broad platform and we use a server middleware to connect with all services, like for example Magento or any other services like Algolia or this kind of stuff. Then we bring it to our client, which is our front end. We build this with React.js. It's full progressive app. We have all the things in there, all the fun things, including the push notifications, etc. And and we open source our version for Magento, and I hope to tell you more about it later.
All right. So that was the Falcon. GC, do you want to go over your storefront?
No, actually, I would prefer for Eric to go first.
That's yours, Eric.
Very good. So those who are not familiar with PWA Studio is a set of developer tools that allow you to create a progressive web app on top of Magento, right? And so uniquely, this is something that James Zetlin and team have really been on a mission for roughly the last 2 or 3 years. And we're really excited about the latest advancements, most recently with PWA Studio 7. But in a sense, it's a React-based framework, and we have spent a lot of time focusing on the developer as a user. So if you think about key workflows and what it means to build, optimize, and deploy, it's no small feat to design and really put together the next generation front-end platform for Magento. And we're really proud of not only the early adopters, but the first stores that have been built upon that. And a lot of that then rides pretty heavily on the work that the GraphQL team is doing and much of the help of the community. And so if you look at what we're doing, it's really, I would say it's really a testament to not only what we've done and how we've done it, but in a sense though, it is a brand new front end for Magento. We've got some great, we've already got some great extensions and themes that are out there already and soon to be available in the marketplace. And for us, again, we've taken great care and time to do this well because we understand the impact this will have and really delivering the best possible shopping experiences and really making the developer lives easier than ever before. And so again, teams back here in Austin have been working tirelessly with James and others to pull that together. And we're just getting started. We've got a lot of work ahead of us, but we've done a lot of work to date.
All right, something's going on with the camera.
Yes.
Yeah, it's kind of cool, but
I agree. It's kind of cool.
Yeah. So shall I go next?
You go.
Because I think actually the reason why I wanted to also be last in line is not that I'm actually going to promote Vue Storefront. So I'm considering Vue Storefront good people. I'm actually helping Vue Storefront also with training. So actually training developers to get used to Vue Storefront. But I'm also doing the same for PWA Studio, and I'm hoping to do the same with Deity as well. But there's other competitors, and that's basically my main point. That it's wonderful that Magento and Deity and Vue Storefront are stepping into this into this how do you say that, like the opportunity to allow for developers to get started with PWA in a more quicker way. And to me, the fun part is actually that there's more names than just those three. Scandi is also working hard to get on top of it. There's multiple others, and on top of it, actually, what I hear frequently is actually that agencies are building their own React frontend, are building their own Vue frontend, because they don't want to rely upon anyone else. And to me, that's kind of like the harder part of the discussion, but also the interesting part of the discussion. The real issue or the real opportunity here is that it's not really about PWA, but basically about headless. Magento being kind of like narrowed down to this Magento backend system, where e-commerce is handled in an awesome way. And as Eric just mentioned, the GraphQL API is then exposing it to the rest of the services involved, and the front end is just another service. Yep. Who cares what kind of front-end architecture you're going to use for that? Who cares what kind of technology you're implementing? That's kind of like the freedom that you should have as a developer, ideally, because there's caveats as well. There's issues making it more harder. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I would like to add something there. GC mentioned something really important, and he says when you build your application, when you're building your application, you don't need to do that in a production server. I really want to highlight the differences between like runtime dependencies and build dependencies, because people come to me and they ask me, Miguel, I want to build Vinia storefront. I want to build, I don't know, Scandi PWA. I want to build this and that in your production servers. And I'm like, it doesn't make any sense to me to maintain those dependencies in a production server, mostly because you are not going to use these dependencies like Chrome headless. You don't need that to actually run your PWA implementation. You need that to build it. And that's a really big difference.
Yep.
And it doesn't help when you come to me and ask me to install those dependencies in your production server, because it just doesn't work like that. You build your stuff someplace else, and then you deploy your stuff to a cloud server, and then people go and run that. But you don't need to do everything in the same server, because it doesn't make any sense dependency-wise. That's what I wanted to add here.
Yeah, that's a great point, Miguel. I think one of the advantages we've seen with, again, several of the stores to date is the agility and the flexibility, right? And so changes that once took, because now you have independent front end and back end, changes that once took weeks, maybe even months, are taking just a matter of days, like sizable UI changes from that one. And so I think that flexibility, kind of like with what Jesse had talked about, with that comes great responsibility. But if we can start looking at standards and ways to do that, we can move faster and really get beyond static experiences, static commerce experiences as part of that. But that's been a really big benefit of that. It's hard to articulate that sometimes with the business audience, but I think with developers, it's like, oh yeah, I can just change this here. And oh, by the way, I don't have to refresh the cache, and those changes can happen so much faster as a result of this, just in headless, which has been great.
I completely agree, and that's my experience too. Anybody, anything you want to add, Jamie or GC?
Yes. So this flexibility, and that's something that we see is extremely important in this field, and especially now in these times with the COVID. It's really been fast tracking this whole thing. Everybody wants to get online right now. We also need stability for that. So it's not just making sure that you're fast. You really need to be able to build it in a stable way, so you won't get stuck in the future, as we saw before with this very tightly coupled monolithic stores that people build very fast, and then at some point they get stuck and they get in trouble when they actually have a very sustainable business, and then they cannot move anymore. So that's something that we call the FIRE principle. So we say, if you really want to build a good web shop, you need to be flexible, integratable, reliable, and extendable. And in that way, you are very future-proof.
Yep.
Basically, one of the questions I would have for Jamie and Eric is also if we're talking about the benefits of PWA, there's always these business benefits, but if we make it a little bit more technical, then Eric, you just mentioned that by having a React environment, a simple UI change is suddenly just much easier to work with. Well, what I hear in the field by talking to agencies is kind of like a mixed story. So the difficulty is that for some people working with React in the front end, it really becomes like rapid development, a game changer because of the speed of development. But what would be the success factors to actually make that happen? Why would people choose for Deity and PWA Studio instead of actually just building it themselves?
Well, I think to start with, I mean, it's the same question if you ask why would people choose Magento instead of building their own e-commerce system? And, you know, the basics are that we did it. We already did it. We've already been doing it for a few years now. We know what we're doing. We already, you know, we already took the first faults. You don't have to make the faults. You know, we make the first mistakes. We had a trial and error. And it's not just, and I think that is one of the biggest mistakes that people build React, or they use Vue for the front end, you know, that they can easily build, and then they go live, and then there's a huge problem with the SEO, because, you know, if you build it like this, you really have to know what you're doing. So all these integrating things like server-side rendering, but also dynamic content, and making sure that, you know, Google can see what's happening as you're building a single page application. You need to be able to track where your user is if you want to use that to improve your experience, and also to know actually what's going on your website. So there's a lot of things where it needs to be built, and we call this batteries included. So if you choose for us, you still have the full freedom to build your own experience, but you get the batteries included for us. We make sure the batteries are there, it's running, it's there, there's all components you can create your own website with.
Yeah, maybe to extend upon that a little bit. What you're saying rings a bell with me. So a lot of times when I hear agencies say like, hey, but whatever Deity did and Vue Storefront did and PWA Studio did, we can do that ourselves. I think often they're comparing an e-commerce site with a simple React or Vue-based CMS. Yes. Well, if you're going to build your own blog page within React, indeed, it's simple. But there's more to e-commerce, and that's basically where you guys come in by just.
Yes. It's a whole platform.
It's a whole platform, batteries included, as you said it. Yeah.
Yes.
It is. And I think it's really about standards, right? And I think that's what we've taken great care. And again, we've got such a great community. So to date, we have about 2,000 active members that we chat with almost daily, and over 100 contributors. And of course, we've got Jordan and Lars as our maintainers. We've made a couple pivots in the past 2 or 3 years because we do want to make sure we get this right. In many ways, PWA Studio itself has helped us pressure test and shape GraphQL to make sure that meets the needs of the general needs, I think, of headless as well. But really, much to what Jamie said, you know, we've taken the time to really put together a series of ready-made components, started to separate some of the business logic so that you don't have to. But it doesn't mean you can't do it without it. We've got a great retailer here in the US that has done just a completely custom React version of their store. It looks fantastic, high performance, and that's just on top of GraphQL, right? And so they've got a very skilled, very sizable development team in-house, but not everybody has that luxury. And I think, you know, yes, I think I like what you talked about. Or I'm interested in hearing more maybe later here on what you're hearing from the agencies, because I think there's a lot of enablement around this, where, you know, PWA, this whole discussion around PWA, you know, being the cure for all, but the reality is there's some work to be done in terms of learning React, learning Vue, learning whatever that kind of framework that you need in order to make that jump. There's some work there to get started, but in many ways these are open standards that, in the longer discussion, brings new developers into the Magento community as well, which is actually pretty exciting. People who maybe have never touched the platform before.
Yeah, maybe
I would like
quickly react on that. So Vue or React is one of those silly questions that I guess Miguel gets more often as well. But the question is wrong, because if you're a Vue developer, you're going to opt for Vue. If you're a React developer, you're going to opt for React. And if you don't know either yet, or neither, then you should actually just familiarize yourself with both before you can make that decision. And I think that's boiling down to the difficulties that agencies currently have. If you don't have any knowledge here, then PWA is a really tough choice. But as soon as you get going with React instead of Vue, then the choices become more evident as you go along. So the key is still to get the right knowledge level before making the right decisions.
Yep.
Yeah, and I also think that it's not just, you know, about this technology. And for example, what we do, we build this platform and we have our team built in React, but you can build your own team in Vue.js and still use our platform. I mean, it is not a you know, if you choose Data, you're gonna automatically choose React. It's not about that. And I think it's the same, I'm not sure with Venya. I mean, the Venya does use React components, but I'm sure that you have a way that you can add Vue in there as well. I'm not sure, but
Oh.
nope. Okay, sorry.
No, that's all right.
So yeah, but I mean, so with us, you can. So it's not about choosing this technology. I think it's just, you know, what do you like? It's a never-ending story. I sometimes say, you know, when I talk with people doing Vue, I talk with people doing React.
Yep.
It's really a religion almost. Some people are very active on that, but it's not about that.
Agreed.
Yeah, in my experience, most of the conversation has moved from what are you guys talking about to, okay, this is really interesting. How can I use this? And that's like, I've been trying to do this at Nexus for like 2 or 3 years already. And when I gained some traction, people started asking me, hey, how can I use this instead of what's PWA, which is actually really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Miguel,
right.
you were interested in the hosting part of PWA itself as well, right? So the whole question of whether you use a middleware layer or not is kind of like something you needed to dive into.
Yeah, absolutely. We can talk about that all day. I'm not going to take a lot of time, but it's basically, there are things we can support. There are things other hosts can support, but the biggest distinction I've seen is consuming directly GraphQL and using a middleware. It's not the best way to differentiate these kind of applications, but it help us cloud providers to actually understand what are the requirements needed to run this kind of stuff in production, because that's the other thing. There are ways, like, as long as you're running this in your own computer for development, I don't care what you do. But the second you put this in production and you have to take, I don't know, 100 or 1,000 or 10,000 users or 10,000 concurrent users, that's a completely different story. So it's really important for people to understand the differences between a production environment and your computer where you develop locally. And while that might sound silly or like really, really common, a lot of people don't seem to understand that. And they will come to me and ask me, can I run this Node.js server exposed to this random port on the internet? And I'll be like, well, maybe not, you know, I don't know if that's gonna work for your like 10,000 concurrent users. I don't know how to work with PM2 to keep that node process running. It's not that simple. And JavaScript, it's really wild. Like, they are reinventing the wheel all day long. And I'm like, why don't you just use Apache and serve this as CSS, HTML, and JS? And they're like, whoa, can you really do that? And I'm like, sure, of course, you can build this, you can transfer this to this server, and it will work. But yeah, this is a really interesting conversation more people should have, because it's not that easy to host this. It's not like you put this in a folder and it just works. We are used to the PHP world. We are used to like the PHP servers, which are basically serverless. If you think about it, you just put your stuff in there and it simply works. But it's not that simple with JavaScript, and we are trying to figure a way to standardize the way we deploy and the way we serve these kind of projects to the general audience. And it's not that simple.
Yeah, so this is basically something I'm always trying to introduce as well. As soon as you're going the headless way, as soon as you're considering PWA as a solution based on React and Vue, having a middleware layer might be a good idea, but it might also be a wrong idea. It might be depending upon what you're going to do with it. And what a lot of people don't understand or don't realize is that you're choosing a different stack. It's not just the theming part that is different. You also need to organize the stack that lies behind the front end in a different way as well. So to me, one of the golden opportunities, for instance, with having a middleware layer, for instance, is that the PWA could connect to this middleware layer, and then the middleware layer is contacting Magento for all of its e-commerce tasking. But then when it comes to search in general, instead of just contacting Magento to search the Elasticsearch database, the PWA is able to contact the Elasticsearch instance directly. So it's just turning the entire stack upside down. Instead of putting Magento in the middle, it becomes just one of those services out there.
Yeah, I think that to add something about that, I think the biggest misconception about this is that PWA is not an architecture. And I think that people start this idea, PWA, if I do PWA, I'm automatically doing headless or anything like that, but that's not true. PWA can be used even in a monolithic way. So it's not talking about middleware, talking about headless, that's really our next steps. And a middleware, you typically see when you move to a service-oriented architecture where everything becomes a service, so including what you mentioned, Magento then becomes a service, and you can use search as a service, and you can use all other services which connect to the middleware, and then they pass this information to one front end, which could be a PWA, but could also be other things. And this front end doesn't even have to be a website. This front end can be any other point of sales out there. So this middleware, taking a decision on using middleware or not, is really taking a decision on what your architecture is about, and not about what kind of technology am I using for my progressive web app. And of course, in the traditional middleware, was much more complex, as you needed to use service orchestrators and ETL tools. And now with GraphQL, that really makes it much easier, as this GraphQL basically replaced this service orchestrator and ETL tools out there. So I do think that the middleware got a little less complex, but doing it right is still an architecture decision and not a PWA user experience decision.
So does PWA Studio require a middleware?
It depends. So, so much like Jamie said, a lot of it comes down to GraphQL. We rely pretty heavily on, especially with the latest version, we're upgrading to Apollo Client 3.0 for that. And so that's a big part of what we do, again, based on all the work that's happening with every patch and minor release. But ultimately, you know, when developers, partners, and merchants come to us, they often come to us with a problem like server-side rendering, right? And so when you think about server-side rendering, you know, we do have a couple solutions, both first-party and third-party from the community. First-party, you know, James has done a great job with Upward. Think about that as your PHP connector initially in a way that's probably pretty familiar to you with how that might be done for Magento too. But we're going to continue to advance that. We're going to start introducing the idea around node containerization, make that a little bit more familiar, I think, for front-end audiences in the near future. But also the community's picked up again around the ideas of server-side rendering, like Jordan and the Experience team have SEO Snap, and so we can create services that help us unlock and help those situations as well, where maybe we have a basic capability with Upward on server-side rendering, where the communities picked this up and created an entirely kind of separate service that serves a need specifically for that. So there's a lot of options, a lot of flexibility. You know, I think as we all look at this together, I think we often learn from each other, and I think that's a really important thing. But ultimately, it just comes down to how these are integrated, which is often around GraphQL, but there's many ways to do it.
I wanted to highlight something. Sorry, you go, Jamie.
Oh, yeah, maybe something nice to mention is that if you, I'm not sure if everybody's familiar with the Mage zine magazine, the latest edition, I wrote a very extensive article about this, so about headless PWA and about GraphQL architectures from a front-end point of view. And maybe it's nice for the Magento community to get familiar with this magazine. It's really interesting, and you can read more about this as well.
Yeah, so it's pronounced Mage zine or Mage zine. I never know.
Mage zine, I don't even know, but magezine.co and visit. There's a lot of great content in there, and the latest version includes an article about this subject.
That's a good call out. That they do a really good job over there.
They do.
Yeah, what I wanted to say is that one of the things GC said is extremely important. We are really used to have Magento in the center of any project, and it's not going to be that common. I think Magento is going to be a really tiny part of a larger project, and it's going to be only processing orders. So when we have a PWA application, and then we have Elasticsearch, and then we have Magento, and then we have Redis, Varnish, they're just tiny parts of a really big system that has a lot of moving parts. And we are really used to having Magento at the center, but that's not going to be the norm in the future. At least that's the way I see it. At least that's the way I see people integrate Magento. It's not like everything goes in there. It's just more like a checkout software, if you ask me.
Yeah, and that's also for me kind of intriguing. So when I started with PWA development, so in React first and then later on with Vue, I had kind of like the same feelings regarding extensibility or theming that I was expecting that would be in there. And actually, from the perspective of a real React developer, you don't need theming, but instead you just build your own theme. You build the CSS, you build the HTML in the way that you want to, and then you start collecting all of those third-party components just to get them in there. Which is also kind of like, I think, the issue with the current Magento ecosystem, that they're expecting PWA and headless to come up with certain features that are part of the original Magento monolith as well.
Right.
So yeah, I do know that, for instance, Deity has some kind of theming abilities in their own front-end architecture. So maybe,
Yes.
Jamie, you want to pick up on that a little bit?
Yes, sure. So we have different ways to work with your front end. Basically, it comes with a theme. We have front kits in there. So that's all functional components, and we have data components in there, which you can, and UI components you can fully customize and theme on a code level. But we also have a way to do it in a visual way. So when you're actually on the website, and you can, in the right corner, something appears and you open it, and you can edit the front end as you go. So it's really cool. You can edit literally everything: colors, fonts, sizes, spacing, everything out there. And then when you're ready, the code is being generated automatically. You just download it and put it in your code. So it's really, really cool to see how fast you can work with this. And I think this is something really cool that wouldn't happen in a normal, let's say, normal front end out there. And I think that these kind of things really help to adapt the speed of a team working together, because you have marketeers. We don't have to bother the developers to say, hey, add one more pixel here, one more pixel there. Can you try this shade of green, this shade of pink? They can just do it themselves and show and say, hey, this is what I want. And they can do it very fastly. So theming can be done in different ways. It's really fun.
So Eric, does PWA Studio also consider stuff like this?
They do in some parts, right? And so Page Builder is a big part of what we're doing around PWA. And so that was initially released at the beginning of the year. But we've got some really interesting ideas. I think, quite honestly, I think being part of the larger Adobe family, they've taken a lot of interest in what we've done. And then you start to see elements of that also, in some of the sites that are even launched out there today using some of our components. But, when you think about the workflows like Jamie was talking about, very often the designer is left out of, the marketer is left out of that when we talk about this. And so, I've long championed a prototype, or at least a demo on things like Adobe XD. So bringing back into the designer, creating a style sheet that, oh, by the way, can just export to React components as part of that. And so I think, longer term, I think we're going to open doors that are part of the kind of larger family that do that. I haven't seen anything yet, but we always get a lot of interest, and wouldn't be surprised if that picks up at some point for that one. And that starts to help with theming. And that concept of theming is something the team, and I think the community, had to kind of wrap their mind around. Is this a theme, or this is a front end? And the reality is it's a bit of both, but you're going to start to see more theming. And today I've seen about 3 specific third-party themes for PWA Studio that start to look at what that might mean. But I do like how Deity and others have started to look at those controls that can be quickly switched by business control. I think we need to do more for the merchants, for business level controls.
I think that what you mentioned is that often these people are left out of the workflow and about this process, left out of this process. And I think it's really important to include them. The improving of the website, improving of the, of your conversion rate and this kind of things, it's not done by developers. This is done by marketeers. This is done by experts on this field, and they need to get the right tools to actually work with this. And by including them, I think it's also interesting from a business point of view is that this is where the budget is. right? So the budget is in marketing, biggest budgets in the thing. So if they marketeers have a way to help in this development process, I think that's really interesting to give them the space to do that.
So the funny thing is actually, you might be right, but as a developer, I simply hated what you just said.
Yes,
it's basically that once I bumped into the component-based architecture of Vue and React, I simply loved it, that it really had a developer approach.
Yes.
So there's also this concept of Lego versus Playmobil. So I'm not sure if everybody in the audience actually knows these two toy brands, but Playmobil basically always supplies all of the little mans and houses and whatever cars as is, and you can't modify it easily. But with Lego, basically you can just build whatever you want to build. But that's a developer approach, and then indeed, like having kind of like CMS capable, or how do you call it? Theming capabilities?
Yeah, we call it visual theme editing. So you actually are on the real website and you click as you go. So you added it would be, you know, as we as developers would do before, we would open the tools within Chrome and then, you know, change the color there and then you would see it appearing, but we are doing this in a visual way. So it's basically that, so they actually in a visual way can see, okay, so I want to add a little bit space, want to add a little bit that, but I can share a link later where you can all try it out and you can play around with it. I think maybe that might be cool for the audience to do. Yeah, and it's just I think it's indeed the Lego. We have both. We have Lego for the developers out there and we have Playmobil for the other people. As if we're two different species, but we're not. We're all in the same team.
Yeah. It's interesting. It merits a whole, probably a whole discussion on its own. But I think as you look at those two different workflows, very often one of the things that really needs to be monitored, and I think it comes back to hosting and really other, I would say other actions, which is performance, right? And so how many times have we been developers where we've handed the keys back over to a business or a marketing person, and there's a big, you know, large image or a piece of script that may throw off performance. In many ways, some of the key reasons why people want PWA to begin with, right? And so I think, you know, with that comes great responsibility. And I think when we start introducing those concepts over to the business users, we have to be really careful of the trade-offs they make along the way. So we spend a lot of time and think a lot about that. That can be often done with CI/CD processes for developers, but what does that look like for business users? Like a big warning saying, hey, by the way, great job on this new content. That's going to add 12 seconds to your page. Are you okay with that? Like those types of things. I think we have to think more about that, I think, as an ecosystem, but we do open up that flexibility for sure.
All right. I think we are almost there. I think we still have like 15 minutes and a couple of questions. So if you have any questions right now, feel free to post that on the chat. We'll be answering the questions we know, and we will be trying to answer the ones we have no idea about. But yeah, we still have 15 minutes, and I think this has been great. This discussion has been extremely interesting. I'm the guy who knows the less here, and I'm really excited about all the things I learned. I really hope this is being recorded because I want to watch this again. But yeah, we got a couple of questions in the chat, so let me read them real quick. So this one's for Eric. So how Adobe sees Magento open source, like prioritizing which issues should be fixed right away? This is a really tricky question, Eric, so go.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think it's really two questions in one. So the first question is, how does Adobe see Magento open source? And I would say, and you'll hear a lot about this at the Adobe Developers Live conference later this month, but they're investing heavily in it. They really believe in what we're doing, how we're doing it. In many ways, that's how we came to the Adobe family. So I think that needs to be recognized. And you start to see that in key projects like PWA Studio and others, where the uptick in the growth and the adoption has been strong. Again, we talk to almost 2,000 members a day. You know, whether you measure by members, stars, what have you, they believe in that, and they see a future where a lot of our work can kind of start to come together for that as the underpinnings of not just Magento, but even Adobe, right? And so I think the future is bright when it comes to that, and they've been nothing but supportive, and you'll hear a lot more from Jason and others in the next 2 weeks. In terms of the prioritization itself, you know, Adobe specifically doesn't necessarily have a hand in that. The team, and at the moment we've got two internal feature teams, but really with input from the community, whether they be the advisory board we've created with Lars, Jordan, and really the the community as a whole, we work together on prioritizing these, but quite honestly, our near-term priorities are very clear. We are wrapping up what most would call the completion of the Venya reference storefront, specifically around my account. And in many ways, that'll give almost anybody exactly what they need for B2C, but we're then going to fast follow into B2B. There's a lot of work and opportunity there as we start to get into the new year, and that's going to introduce a new series of components and others that are part of that. And so the nice thing about what we're doing and the nice thing about open source is that we're an open book, sometimes a bit too open, and people can pop into our community meetings almost every Friday, and our roadmap and a lot of the details are out there to share. So yes, short answer is yes, there definitely is a place for us, and they believe we're in open source. And second is, it's really a team decision, but I think, again, the community helps shape the product. And so that also affects things like prioritization as well.
That's a great answer. I really appreciate that, because I know people sometimes think Adobe is going to take everything, and I know it's not true. And I really appreciate you taking the time to be like, here's what we do, here's how we do it, here's how you can participate. It's really important. I really appreciate it. So to the next question, what do you suggest, Magento PWA or Scandi PWA? GC, you want to take that one?
Yeah, so I think like if we would put this into the hands of Eric, he's just going to say PWA Studio. He's going to say neither.
It's different though. I'd love to hear your take, and I know we talked about this in advance. They're doing a very interesting take on this of more of a theme versus a front end, and I think that may appeal to some. Yeah. And so I think that's what makes it interesting. But go ahead, please.
Yeah, so in short, to make that decision, you need to make you need to have the knowledge again also on how things are working. So Scandi basically is just installed as a theme on its own, so a regular Magento theme. There's not as of yet. There's no theme inheritance yet, but I believe that's actually coming up with Scandi PWA version 3. But also there's other companies actually expanding or building on top of Scandi. For instance, there's a company called Next PWA, which is basically trying to extend upon that same base architecture with more and more features. But I think in general, it's kind of like the approach that they're taking, that you can still work with Scandi in the same mindset that you had for years. And that mindset is basically that they're providing the majority of the components. They're making it happen that you have this front end out of the box that is working in a nice way, and then you start modifying it. And I think, or that's what I hope for, is actually that PWA Studio is taking a different route. Instead of just offering you a ready-made front end that is including all of the features, but also all of the features that you don't need. It's just shipping with a box created out of Lego stones, and all of those Lego stones could be implemented by you in the right way. So bottom line, I think also choosing between PWA Studio and Scandi is kind of like the same thing that you need to do with choosing for View Storefront or Deity or all of those other options. It's a personal choice. And if you like the way that Magento was making possible the theming architecture in the last couple of years, I'm putting a joke here. If you like knockout and require, then maybe
I saw your last presentation, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But the issue is basically choice. It's really about maybe familiarizing yourself also with the tooling at hand, not just making a choice because somebody else is telling you, but start playing with it. Try to maybe also build a simple project, a really, really simple project, maybe even something excluding a checkout, just to see like how the modification process works. And then you can make a proper educated decision.
That's always important, trying to do an educated decision instead of being like, you know what, I'm going to go with this. That never works. And I've seen that fail a lot because people is like, no, you know, I like React. I'm going to go with, I don't know, React storefront. And I'm like, have you tried that? Do you know if that fits your requirements? And people is like, nah, I just like React. And that's a terrible idea.
Yeah, but sometimes I've also heard like developers that try out React and then like React and then come to me with the question, or should I choose Vue? And personally, then again, my take is, well, if you like React and you can be productive in React, go with React. So
Yep.
it's a personal matter, basically.
Yep. Now to the next question. Joseph asks, speaking of PWA, one of the coolest features of PWA can do is working offline. Do you think this offline capability can work in e-commerce? Would it just work only for browsing the products, or beyond that, would it work until checkout, place order? That's something we can talk about. Jamie, want to start?
Sure. Well, I think that's a very interesting question, as working offline is indeed one of the features that PWA can provide. But I think we shouldn't view it as working offline, like I'm gonna make the whole site work as it should work online, make it work offline. I think working offline should be part of your user experience, the journey, what you're gonna serve the user, the visitor, when they have a bad connection or no connection. And I think thinking of it in that way, thinking of it in a way of the user experience. So what is the experience you want them to have, rather than trying to reproduce what a site should do when it is online? I think that makes it a very different approach and a different way of looking at this feature. As I think this feature is not just a replacement for anything else, but it's a new level, it's a new dimension to the online world. And rather than focusing on trying to make it work until the checkout and then check out automatically when you are back online, I think you should maybe see it as a combination. Maybe you want to show, so if someone is on offline, what are they doing? They're most likely in a plane, or they're in an elevator stuck, they're not like trying to shop at that moment. There's a certain situation going on, and you have to keep in mind, so where's my user at the moment he's offline? If he's in a plane, maybe you want to serve him some content, a story about your brand, some history, maybe explain them how your products are being made, or something like that. And if someone is jumping in an elevator and it's very short time, you maybe want to show them just the 5 top products, right? Or maybe based on their location. So what is something that is useful for them at that moment, at that location? And then when they are back online, you can combine PWA functionalities and send them, for example, push notification, telling them, hey, you're back online, the store is working like this. And I think we should really see it as an extra dimension to the user experience, rather than trying to reproduce the site working online.
Yeah, maybe
make the Marketeers make the Marketeers part of this story.
Yeah, and I think also the difficulty is that no project is alike. So in essence, an offline message could just be simply shown you. So you can just add a little bit of JavaScript to PWA saying like, hey, if you're offline, let's display a certain message. Or if you're offline, let's remove the add to cart button from products. But it's depending, and maybe you want to build a shop that allows for an offline cart to be put together. But maybe some other customers react like, hey, but then you can't check up on the inventory, and the inventory is changing so rapidly. So it's impossible. Or likewise, if you have a shop with 1,000 products, you might want to download, or you might be able to download like a limited subset of the data of those products towards the offline cache. But if you have 1 million products, it doesn't work like that. So personally, I see it as the capability that is there. But then the actual implementation just depends.
Yeah, it's story specific. It's really, it's just a layer to the story, and you need to find the right story to tell. What do you want to tell people when they're offline and still on your website? At least they're dedicated because they're visiting your website while they're not online. So that is one thing. And that is, I think, one message you can take into account. These are not people who stumble upon your website when they're offline because they don't go through Google. They're offline. So there's always direct customers who know you, and what do you want to share with them?
All right, so we have a couple of questions still to reply. We don't have a lot of time, but we'll take one more question and then we'll do the closing remarks, if that's okay.
Sure.
Now, I'm gonna take Pichu's question. He asked, what do you think when the whole or most of the Magento community will move to PWA as a front-end? I think this is a really interesting question. We all think the future is PWA. We all think the current front-end won't last a lot, but I have absolutely no idea when the switch is going to be made. I would love to see that happening like tomorrow, but I'm not really sure when that's going to happen, to be honest. What do you guys think?
Well, so I think that we should not overlook the fact that PWA is, well, first of all, hype. It's a marketing term. It's a description. It's an abbreviation that doesn't fit like the impression that a lot of people have from it. But from a technology point of view, you could also just say that you're adding PWA features to an existing Magento 2 front end by simply just adding a couple of files. And those files are adding maybe a service worker or adding a little bit of mobile flavor on top of the regular front end. And that makes it already a PWA. I think the bigger question would be, what kind of other opportunities do we still have in the front end of Magento? And then specifically, I think, well, this is again a little bit like the thing I was joking about earlier, but the current front end based on knockout or require is simply outdated. So something new needs to come up. But I don't think that there's a single front end going to pop up and that's going to win from everything else. We're going to see a lot of diversity. So actually, when is that moment when everybody is switching over to PWA? I think the other question would be, or that's maybe the answer, it's the moment when everybody is just stepping away from the old front end. So
yeah, I think it's the same. I mean, it's the same answer as the question: when did everybody move to get rid of a separate mobile and desktop website? When did everybody move, to bring everything in one? And I think that that's the same question. It didn't happen just like that. It happened over time.
Yeah, I mean, we get this question obviously pretty often, and I think we've been very careful about making sure that we're ready, both as a product, a platform, and a community for that. And so it's not going to be forever. I mean, it's hard to sustain two different front ends kind of in perpetuity. But we're very careful about it. We want to make sure it's complete, production ready. We've got a flourishing ecosystem, set of extensions, marketplace, what have you, and we pay a lot of attention to the feedback for the community to make that possible for that one. So it's really important. And we've got to do it right for sure. The nice thing is that we do have options.
Miguel?
I'm still here. Okay. So we really need to wrap this up. We are going to do our closing remarks. You can still find us. You can still find us on Twitter, LinkedIn, and in the network chat later. But I really appreciate the time you took to be here today. This was a really good panel. I'm really interested in this subject. And what I would like to say before we're done, and you all will have time to say something, is that you really need to understand what you're doing. You don't just do a PWA and make it run, because it doesn't work like that. You really need to understand the technologies you're using. You really need to understand how to run this in production. It's not just like throwing a couple of files in a production server and hoping it to run. This is more than that, and there's a lot to be learned before even starting. So keep learning, and please don't try to install this in your production servers. Okay, anything you want to say, guys, before we close? Eric, Jamie, GC, you have a couple of minutes.
Well, I just want to thank everyone for joining. Sorry, and and I think that what we've seen the last couple of weeks was really great. We've seen, due to COVID, which is a bad thing, we've seen a very big acceleration in innovation. Shops are really moving fast at the moment, and I think what we're doing now with this new technology can really help with that. So if you have anything and you need some help on it, or you would like to try it out, feel free to reach out. You can find me on Twitter. You can find me basically everywhere, and feel free to reach out and innovate together.
Yeah, and what I would like to add on top of that is that I'm going to organize Reacticon in a couple of weeks' time, in the middle of October. And actually, everyone here in this call will be joining, and hopefully everyone listening to this PWA panel is also going to join, because, well, the more we talk about PWA, the more questions we have. And the only way to solve those questions is actually to interact and discuss and talk to each other. So Reacticon is an online and free conference to allow for that, on top of all of the other wonderful conferences that we have already.
Yeah, and just to build on top of everybody and what they've said. So I think, again, thank you, Miguel, for organizing this. Thank you to everybody for attending. I've heard we had at least 70 people in chat from the organizers, which is great for this one. So yeah, I would say that the biggest piece of advice is really just to get started, start playing around with this, as Yessi would say. Don't future is headless, don't be a chicken. Prototyping, experimentation is really, really important. Maybe not in production like Miguel is talking about right away, but take the time to learn the frameworks, learn how this works, learn how this solves some of the problems that Jamie had talked about for your marketing teams, etc. You'll find a way, and if you need help, our entire community is there to help participate and help answer those questions. I think we pride ourselves on being out there and being able to address those, and we're pretty easy to find if you need it.
Super awesome, everyone. Thank you so much for sharing, and thank you so much for the insights. Jamie, Eric, Jose, Miguel, you guys rocked. Anyway, PWA and headless are the most famous topic that we are talking about nowadays. Is really game changing. Anyway, we know some of you should stay up late or maybe woke up early in the morning to join this paneling discussion. Really appreciate it. Hopefully you guys can traveling to Indonesia, and we will able to discuss face to face maybe on the next event. Cross finger. Thank you once again. Good afternoon, good morning, good night, wherever you are. Thank you so much. Okay, well, that's wrap up the event. Thank you for all the participants. Thank you for all the speakers. Apologies that we cannot answer all of your questions, but you can still reach out to the speakers through Twitter, email, and so on. And then thank you for all the sponsors that support making this event happens. Hopefully this event can inspire you as always. Please stay online, stay cool, stay healthy, stay safe, and then we look forward to seeing you in the next year Meet Magento 2021 face to face. I wish. Okay, remind you once again, there will be a closing on the keynote, so please join the keynote sessions, and there will be a winner announcement there. And once again, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.